These are Nebraska corn farmers. They work in acres, not hours, harvesting the energy and climate solutions the world needs. We are proud to stand with you.
The success of tomorrow's soy industry depends on the actions we take today. The future is here, and the time to move is now.
Market Journal, Television for Agricultural Business Decisions, is a presentation of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources in partnership with the Nebraska Rural Radio Association. Promotional support provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine, and partial funding provided by the Nebraska Soybean Board and the Nebraska Corn Board.
Hi everyone, I'm Bryce Duskett, and thank you so much for joining us today on Market Journal. Well, here we are now midway through the month of December. On today's show, we'll discuss what cattle producers should be paying attention to as we near the end of the year. Drones have become a popular tool for ag producers. We'll have a look at some of the large ones that were on display at this year's Nebraska Ag Expo. Plus, Darin Newsom is going to be stopping by here in a bit to give us his 2 cents when it comes to the grain markets. That is all straight ahead on Market Journal. But first, for a century now, propane has been the quiet workhorse of rural America, serving diverse purposes. In today's agricultural landscape, its role has significantly expanded. At this year's Husker Harvest Days, we found out some of the reasons why. Market Journal producer Mike Straub joins us with those details.
Propane plays a large role in agricultural places, especially those that get freezing temperatures in the winter, to heat agricultural buildings as well as greenhouses. Propane grain dryers can remove the same amount of moisture from harvested grain while using half the thermal energy as previous older models.
Most folks around the farm understand kind of what we do as far as very traditional types of things. You know, grain drying is a big user of propane this time of year across the Midwest. As it gets colder though, we see building heat for livestock and greenhouses really pick up. And I think the reason we see that, it's clean, it's affordable, it's available, and we don't see any fuel conditions. So guys that are using possibly propane for irrigation that may not need it in a particular area that year don't have to worry about the fuel condition. So that propane can stay there indefinitely and stay in condition. I think that makes it very unique in the fuel and energy space.
Propane generators and solar panels are found to be a good partnership. If a solar power isn't providing enough energy, the propane generator will kick in to pick up the slack.
We are seeing propane generators being paired with those systems more and more across the U.S. So, for instance, in California, we're seeing a lot of solar and propane power generators being paired along with battery. So when we don't have enough power, we don't have enough sunlight, we don't have enough wind power, that propane generator kicks on and produces enough power very affordably.
Propane is a greener alternative when compared to natural gas and other types of fuel because of its efficiency, non-toxicity, and low emission output. Propane is being used more often in organic farming.
Grain drying is the biggest one across the U.S. It's the biggest one in my market in the ag space. It's also the most variable fuel use in the ag space as well. Some years we use a lot for grain drying, others we don't. One thing that we do see in organic farms that's becoming more and more accepted is using propane for weed flaming and weed eradication. So we've got toolbar type applications. Some of them are made right here in the state of Nebraska, and those devices are used to have an open flame essentially burn the weed, kill the weed, and it qualifies and is certified for organic.
Irrigation engines help farmers keep their crops hydrated. New propane-fueled engines are even cleaner and more efficient than older machines and offer high-tech features like remote monitoring and control systems.
I think there's some very obvious things that we can point people towards as far as, you know, cost. If folks are looking at an irrigation engine, that irrigation engine on propane is going to be considerably cheaper than a diesel-based engine. So I think the upfront cost, the operational cost of that is going to be cheaper as well. Our fuel is very cheap compared to diesel or gasoline today. And we're seeing propane really come to benefit as well when you're comparing it to the electric grid. Electric prices continue to escalate, so we're seeing propane even in the irrigation space where a big percentage of the irrigation is electric when you look at it nationally. we're becoming almost the fuel of choice from a cost standpoint in that regard.
Propane burns cleanly and efficiently with 11% fewer greenhouse gas emissions than diesel and 24% less than gasoline. It makes for an excellent fuel source for heating both your buildings and water supply for your plant animal containment facilities. It doesn't degrade like other fuels, making it perfect for backup generators. Reporting for Market Journal, I'm Mike Straub.
Thank you for the story, Mike. If you're interested in learning more about ways you can utilize propane in your home and on your operation, you're encouraged to visit propane.com for all the answers. Shifting gears now, we delve into some of the efforts to champion beef consumption. The Beef Checkoff is constantly reminding consumers that beef is indeed what's for dinner. At the helm of this initiative is Greg Haynes, Chief Executive Officer for the Cattlemen's Beef Promotion and Research Board. Our recent conversation with him offers insights into the past year's endeavors and the board's strategic vision moving forward. Well, let's get an update when it comes to the Beef Checkoff. Joining us is Greg Haynes. He is the Chief Executive Officer of the Cattlemen's Beef Board. As we go back and remind our listeners of the basics of the checkoff, you guys have been around for quite some time. How do you continue to evolve in the funding that's allocated?
Yeah, no, we've been around since 1985. So the Beef Checkoff was started in the 1985 Farm Bill. It went into effect in 1986. We started collecting dollars and had a referendum after that. I think probably most people know, but it's set up so that every time an animal is sold, the dollar's collected. Half of that dollar stays in the state at that state beef council for use there, and the other half comes up to national. So we work on that national side to do marketing, promotion, research, to build demand for beef, and then we work very closely with the state beef councils on leveraging all this and tying it together. But like you said, yeah, it's been around for a while. There's some misperceptions on the program. But also what we've seen is, in 1985, it was $1 per head. Now we're in 2023, and it's still $1 a head. So one of the challenges that that dollar now is really only worth about 35 cents in that purchasing power that we have. So just making sure that we continue to be very efficient and effective with it and get the biggest bang for the buck that we can.
Some of your detractors will say, I don't see anything about the Beef Checkoff. Perhaps the reason is because if you're a cattle producer, you're not necessarily the target market of trying to drive more beef demand. But who is that? In 2023, where are you trying to build demand right now?
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. We hear that a lot. Like, I don't see anything that's going on with the checkoff. Before when you'd advertise, on TV or whatever, there was 3 stations. So that was kind of your options. But now with social media, you can be very, very specific on who you are reaching out to. So beef producers aren't going to see it because we're really targeting those consumers, especially in like high population areas that are purchasing the beef. So this could be housewives, the younger generation too, as they are starting their families and going out and shopping and looking for fun things that they can cook and do at home. Those are really the people that we're reaching out to. And so they're also very tech savvy. They have their cell phones, and so they're the ones that, as they're shopping, they can be getting messages right in store that say, hey, here's how you can cook this beef cut, or here's some ideas on what to do. And so that helps them make those decisions and purchase it right then at the store.
Yeah. Grilling is cool again for a lot of people. You got the smokers, people got a fancy setup, and they want to find the right meat to put on the grill.
Exactly.
Obviously, the price of beef has gone up. How do you market to consumers knowing that the dollar for them, like it is for the checkoff, doesn't go quite as far as it previously did?
Yeah, and that's always the challenge. I mean, we've had inflation with this. As you know, cattle numbers are low right now, so our supply of beef is low, which makes prices higher. But I think where we're at in the environment now really shows the benefit of the checkoff. So if you look at that demand for beef, that demand is incredibly strong now, even with those higher prices. So consumers are paying more for beef, but they're continuing to do that. And that's because they know that it's a great tasting, healthy, enjoyable protein to eat. And so they're making it their choice of the center of plate. And so that's something that just doesn't happen overnight. It's not like the checkoff can come in and say, hey, start buying beef, and everybody will. It takes years and years of working with the consumers to make sure that they've got that trust in the product. And that's what we're seeing now. Again, I mean, to me, this is the hugest testament to how impactful the checkoff is this demand for beef that we have right now.
Where's the checkoff headed in 2024? What are you most looking forward to?
Yeah, it's so hard. There's always like so many different programs that are going on, but I think, as we talk with higher prices, having that pulse on what the consumer's concerns are and what they're doing is going to be important. So we have a lot of that kind of consumer tracking, and then tying that into the messaging that goes forward with them is key. A new campaign has started, kind of tied under the Beef It's What's for Dinner, which is Together We Bring More. And that kind of plays on the whole fact that when you're out to celebrate or there's something, exciting, it's like you celebrate with beef. And so it's like, why not celebrate all the little small day-to-day things with beef? So this really kind of gets it out there and shows the enjoyment and the way to just have fun and enjoy every day with beef. So I think these things are coming up. We've got great programs with STEM teachers who are educating their students, especially in like high population areas, on agriculture and how science and technology are in it. And so this is becoming a part of the curriculum. So these kids who've never seen a cow in real life can now learn more about this and be a little bit more in touch with agriculture and beef production. So I think a lot of exciting things going on.
Thanks to Greg for taking the time to sit down with us while we were down in Kansas City. The Cattlemen's Beef Promotion and Research Board, they have 101 different members. If you'd like to learn more about this organization, perhaps you want to be one of the 101 that serve beef producers, you can visit beefboard.org. Up next, let's check in on the grain markets. Joining the program earlier this week was Darin Newsom, who began by reviewing the latest activity when it comes to the corn, soybeans, and wheat markets.
Yeah, it's interesting. We've got three major markets and they're all doing different things. We've got corn just continuing to grind lower. There's no reason for anyone to want to buy at this point. There's plenty of corn to go around. We could see that in spreads. We could see it in basis. So right now it's just kind of, again, as I was told a long time ago by someone on the floor, it's easier for a market to drift down than up, and that certainly seems to be what corn's doing. On the other hand, we've got increasing demand this time of year. For the soybeans, for U.S. soybeans. The problem is it's not enough to get things rolling, at least get things caught up to where it needs to be. But occasionally we still see those bursts. We saw it this past Monday when the market was able to rally 30 cents, and that led some announcements of new sales. So there's still business being done, but again, it's just not enough. And over in the wheat, really the only thing that we've got going on that's pushing soft red winter wheat higher right now, the funds held an incredibly large net short position, and they've been covering that of late.
Okay, of course, right now, South America weather is on the forefront of what's happening in the markets, and it seems like as new forecasts come out, the markets seem to trade that information quite quickly. See some wild swings because of it. Is that a fair assessment, Darin?
That's a fair assessment. Soybeans, all of these markets that we talk about are weather derivatives. And just right now, it's soybeans' turn to stand in the spotlight. And again, it's not U.S. weather, it's South American weather. And just like we see here in the summertime, in the North American summer, we see what wild price swings. And that's exactly what we're getting as forecasts. First they're putting precipitation in, then they're taking it out, temperatures up and down and sideways and everything else. And the markets reflect that. So on top of the overnight buying that we tend to see in the soybean market, the rest of the session, the rest of the day is dealing with these changing weather forecasts.
Okay, back on soybeans when it came to our domestic supply here, and as we look at demand exports, we're 18 to 20% behind our pace that we had last year. You say it's not enough. What are you watching when it comes to exports and demand, that is, for soybeans?
First thing we really need to see is our total sales to go up. And in last week's weekly export sales and shipments update, we saw where total U.S. sales are running 18% behind for the same week the previous marketing year. Shipments also 16 to 18% behind. We followed that up with this past Monday's weekly export inspections. Still, totals down 18% for the year. So we've got to see that improve. And the problem is we're still stuck in a trade war with the world's largest buyer. And I was at a meeting a number of years ago where some analysts who look at China and the Chinese situation, the pencil was being put to the paper at that point, taking U.S. out of the equation as much as possible, and that's certainly the way it's played out. The U.S. can't really consider itself a major player in the U.S. the global soybean market anymore. It's all about China. It's all about Brazil, and only if Brazil has a weather problem does the world's largest buyer get interested in U.S. supplies again.
So to that point, Darin, do we catch up for soybean exports at this point, or are we just going to be lagging behind the rest of the year?
I think if we're going to catch up, it's going to actually be a later than normal move. Usually it's between, it's the 6 months between September and February when the US does most of its shipping. This time around, or what we've seen seasonally as far as a change goes, it all depends on what happens with Brazilian weather. If their crop by the time we get to February, March isn't as large as expected, and the world's largest buyer has already, booked most of it, and it's already getting ready to be shipped at some point. Then they just, only if there's not enough coming out of Brazil do they get interested in the U.S. So we could see a later than normal round of buying, meaning that we may not see those export sales. We may not see those export shipments to get us back up to near normal until after the February timeframe.
Okay, Darin, well, let's get to a couple of viewer questions that came in this week. Of course, we always like to solicit those and pitch them your way. We start with Richard on Twitter. He wrote in, noting historically U.S. corn and soybean future markets peak in late June, early July before beginning their descent to the harvest low. He says, with Brazil harvest become a major player, does that correlate to late December, early January, noting another futures peak for the same crops? Your thoughts?
Yeah, it was a great question from my friend Richard, and I really appreciate him sending it in. And I immediately went to my seasonal studies. I didn't look at the futures market because sometimes those can get skewed. So I pulled up the bar chart national corn and national soybean price indexes and looked at their seasonal tendencies. And yes, we still see those highs, say in the summertime, late May, early June, possibly out into July. But his question was, and I would rephrase it a little bit, Brazil is the major player, and the question mark would be on the U.S. these days. But as far as Brazil being the major player, we haven't seen a seasonal change. We haven't seen that December top in the market. In fact, both cash indexes show a relatively solid uptrend, from the time we get into the winter season up through the spring, early summer. So we don't see that seasonal top in December that we do in the North American summertime.
Darin, appreciate your thoughts on that. Also want to get to Jeff. He wrote in on email, said the local elevator is offering a fair price, in his opinion, for wheat for next September. He's never contracted grain that far out before. He wants to know, is it worth locking in?
Two things. Number one, I will never tell somebody if it's a good price. I won't tell them to not sell. I know that's a double negative, but if it's a good price, we're going to want to do a little bit. The second thing is it's wheat. We never really know what our production is going to be. So if I'm going to start locking it in this early, I'm going to be pretty conservative on what my estimate for yield is going to be. Again, it depends on where it is, depends on what the soil moisture situation is. But certainly if it looks good and historically it's a good price, lock in a little bit, don't go overboard.
Now, next week, we'll be joined by Kyle Bumstead as we discuss the cattle markets. As always, you heard me invite your questions here on the show. Go ahead and email us or get in touch on social media. If you have a question for Kyle, I'll be sure to pass your question along. Each fall, you know this, more than 90,000 fans pour into Memorial Stadium for Football Saturday. Amidst the stadium's charged atmosphere, there's the consumption of a lot of food. A staggering 600 pounds of popcorn kernels pop alongside 13,500 runzas, 21,000 slices of pizza, and nearly 14,000 sizzling hot dogs. In the December issue of the Nebraska Farmer, you can uncover the link between these fans and the farmers who feed their game day appetites. You'll discover how the love for football merges with the agricultural pulse of Nebraska. That, of course, resonates far beyond the field. Check that out in this month's Nebraska Farmer. Well, it is once again time to check in on weather with Nebraska Extension Ag Climatologist and Market Journal Chief Meteorologist Eric Hunt. Eric, what's on your mind and what's in the forecast as we near the end of the year?
Well, thanks, Bryce. We've had a mild December so far. That will continue for next week. I am watching a possible storm that might be moving into our part of the country right around Christmas. More of that in a little bit. Through the week ahead, I think we will have a cold front moving through the state later in the day on Sunday. That should bring us more seasonal temperatures on Monday with highs mostly in the 30s and 40s. Again, nothing significantly cold, but probably a bit colder than what we have been having. As we move into the middle, a later portion of next week will be dominated by upper level ridging, as is shown in both the European and GFS models. Thanks to Eric Snodgrass and Nutrien for these figures. This will lead to mild and dry conditions for most of next week. Again, I don't think we're talking about record warmth, but generally speaking, highs in the 40s to maybe low to mid 50s as we head from Wednesday into Friday. And I think this should lead to very good holiday travel weather as we head into the later portion next week. What I am watching, though, is the potential for a storm system that should be entering the western U.S. by the end of next week. It might be swinging into our area by Christmas Day. The CPC right now currently is showing a decent projection of above average precipitation across pretty much the entire state and a lot of the western U.S. as we move into the week of Christmas. Again, this is still a ways out, but I think it's something worth watching. Current indications are this would be mostly a rain event for most of the state, except for portions of north central Nebraska and northwestern Nebraska. But again, any shift in that track or any additional cold air or anything really dynamic would lead to potential for some snow. So there is a very outside shot that there could be a white Christmas for some of the state this year, even with our relatively mild conditions. Again, the CPC is very bullish on basically the entire U.S. being warm for the week of Christmas, in particular the north central U.S. Again, I think those would be more on the front-loaded side for Christmas as opposed to after. But again, I don't think we're looking at any real significant cold intrusions before the first of the year. Moving update, we did see some introduction of abnormal dryness into parts of southwestern Nebraska, in particular Frontier, Hitchcock, and Red Willow counties. It's been quite dry down there for most of the fall, and the authors did introduce some abnormal dryness. But in general, we are in much better shape than we were a year ago. One of the reasons that we've seen the drought is, again, precipitation deficits. So going back 4 years, we actually have 20-plus inch deficits over a very large section of the central U.S., and in parts of eastern Nebraska and western Iowa, those deficits are in excess of 30 inches. It's a bit more of the exception than the rule, but we are seeing some parts of the state that over a 4-year period have basically had a deficit of 1 year's worth of precipitation. So again, very significant stuff going back to about the first part of 2020. In terms of more recent precipitation, we have seen some precipitation in southwestern Nebraska. This is good news. So this was not reflected in the latest drought monitor, and I don't know this is enough to move the needle, but again, this is good news for a place that hasn't seen much moisture in the last couple of months. Most of the rest of the state has been very dry the last 7 days, as has been the case for most of the month so far. Soil temperatures right now, generally speaking, across the state are in the low to mid 30s, which is where they have been for most of the month of December. We have yet to see any prolonged freezing of the soil to this point. Soil moisture is kind of where it has been, driest in terms of percentiles where you expect compared to normal, mostly in southeastern Nebraska, southwestern Nebraska, north central Nebraska is in much better shape. And in terms of current U.S. snow cover, the extended snow cover in the U.S. right now is the lowest it's been at this time of year since 2006, with the decent snowpack in parts of Rockies, but most places right now, no real snow cover. Thanks. Back to you, Bryce.
All right, thank you very much for the update, Eric. We appreciate it. Finally today, at this year's Nebraska Ag Expo, there was more new tech than most would know what to do with. Drones in particular were out in full force and on display as producers continued to consider this technology that's certainly starting to take flight. Market Journal's Bill Dodd caught up with a couple of the companies that are helping producers learn the ropes of DIY aerial spraying and scouting.
From checking cattle to irrigation pivots, scouting weeds, and early stand assessments. Over the last several years, the number of applications for drone technology have increased significantly in the agricultural community. The latest application to hit the market is spraying crops. While operating a drone isn't the most difficult task in the world, there are several steps producers must take beyond just buying the equipment. At this year's Nebraska Ag Expo, there were a number of vendors who were ready and able to help producers get educated, licensed, and ready to fly.
Well, first of all, you need to know what you're going to be doing with it. So are you going to be flying it at your own place? Are you going to be using it as a custom application business? Or are you going to be doing a little bit of both? So as people would come to us and they tell us what they're doing, we would map out which drone best suits them, what drones and what tools may or may not help them. They'd come get a quote. They would buy the drone. We'd then have resources for them to do customer training with us, and we help them get all their licensing and everything they need to do to go fly. Our main goal at AgriSpray is to help them not only buy a drone, but to help them with the drone through every step of the process.
When you compare the cost of running diesel-powered equipment over an entire field, in contrast to utilizing drones to scout spots where spraying is most needed and treating them with near-pinpoint accuracy, the savings can really add up. However, there are also several other benefits to the producer beyond cost of operation when compared to traditional ground and aerial applications.
Traditional spraying and aerial spraying are kind of two different things. If you can legally spray that chemical aerially, then we recommend using the drone for that. With a drone, you can get down in the canopy further and it'll spread out the crop more with prop wash, and it'll actually penetrate down into that near the ground further than what you'd see otherwise. And this gives the farmer the ability to do it on their own and not rely on a plane or helicopter or other methods to come do it for them.
While empowering farmers to take aerial spraying into their own hands, drones have also created a new market for custom applicators. The most important thing to remember if you're considering making a purchase of this magnitude is ensuring that it can generate a return on your investment. While owning and operating your own equipment is ideal, it may be more cost-effective in the short term to hire a custom applicator.
We tell guys we don't suggest buying one unless you can make it pay for itself, and that means in totality for all costs, right? A lot of people want to change those cost structures, but we see a 2 to 3 year payback. Anything more than that, and that's where we come in with a custom application and say, hey, for now, until these things either advance more, you might be a better fit for custom application. The big savings in this, though, is in the timing. The application window for fungicide is so tight that even us, anyone from a custom perspective, getting the planes and the choppers or even the drone crews there when you want them to get that timing window exactly when you need to spray that corn is so difficult that this puts that power right back into the farmer's hands. You know, so we don't really convince people that they need it. We can just show them the math and show them what we do with it. And if, you know, that's where the custom app business comes in. You know, if someone wants to, maybe they want to try 100 acres out of 1,000 that they farm and see what kind of results they get.
For the time being, it seems that agricultural drone spraying is no passing fad. Like any new technology, as drones continue to develop and evolve, these products will inevitably become more cost-effective, and the possibilities for precision agriculture will continue to be cultivated. Reporting from the 2023 Nebraska Ag Expo, I'm Bill Dodd.
Good stuff there, Bill. Kind of fun to see the big drones out there at the show. Of course, we had a good time bringing you last week's Market Journal episode from the Nebraska Ag Expo as we focused on all the new technology that was on display. As a reminder for you, if you missed it, you can go back and view that episode by visiting the Market Journal YouTube channel. That is going to do it for this week's broadcast. We hope to see you back here next time. But until then, I'm Bryce Duskett, wishing you a safe and productive week.
Join Market Journal online at marketjournal.unl.edu. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine. Market Journal is produced by the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources.